the unbanked people that yeah, sorry. The stigma is more to do with the perception of the unbanked people or the underserved people that we normally talk about. When they see at the financial services which are being offered to them, the perception is that these are not meant for us. And it's a difficult task, believe me. We have been doing this for the last 5 to 6 years, and it's including the behavioral nudges and all, but it's a very difficult task when we have to actually make these services more relevant to the people in their daily lives. So the challenge is, and the trick is, on both the cases, that how do you make these services more relatable and more meaningful for the end customers in the daily lives. So that, I mean, they are not able to put themselves aside from the other set of bank population.
I think just to add on to like Peter's point, I think it's really the power of education, and I think for education itself, like even the financial literate people need to be educated. So I'll quote an example. Like in Singapore, given that the focus on smart nation and everyone is pretty much like very integrated in the digital technology era, the government is very concerned about a segment of people being left behind, which is like the elderly, like the senior population, because they themselves, even though they may be financial literate, but they are not very digital literate. Like I will give an example. So we did a face-to-face study on 200 senior citizens aged about 55 to about 80 years old. And we actually asked them in terms of like their perception about digital technology and usage of digital technology itself. So a lot of them actually use a lot of mobile devices, like ownership of mobile devices are extremely high. But when it comes to like digital technology apps, like for example, in today's day and age, we have like ride-hailing apps, we have like food delivery apps. And all these, they are not really integrated into the entire behavior. And when we asked some of them, it was really about them thinking that they're too old to learn. It's not suitable for them, or they're just like not adequately like educated about it. So I think that's the power of education in terms of like educating this segment of people. So we actually created a program, and we partnered with a not-for-profit organization as part of the government agency called People's Association, where they actually reach out to community centers and educate people on the ground on various programs. So we actually brought these groups of like senior citizens to like Visa University, which is our learning center, and we taught them about e-commerce and really went down to the basics of like, you know, what is online shopping, what are the various payment tools that they could be used, and what are some of the concerns that they need to be addressed, like for example, like phishing and, you know, not like writing down the card numbers on a piece of paper because they might forget the passwords, etc. So I think these are simple things that we would then have to educate. So in terms of like unbanked and financial literate, I think it's just a different degree of education that we cater to these people.
I think it's much to do. Education is one, but I'm really worried about the word that's been used, the stigma of being unbanked. I mean, I didn't know that unbanked was a stigma. This is a worrisome thought itself. And the way that we can possibly look at kind of breaking the social barriers is definitely financial education, but it's also more, and there needs to be more good practices in terms of how have institutions done that. So there are some examples when we talk of financial education that there are even at the engaging at the school curriculum level. Is that the approach that can help, for the millennials to change things? Is it that during the, is it the awareness itself, an application of what I've kind of enumerated as the principles to the people that can help to break those social barriers? But definitely financial education, but still we need much more examples from the field to show how that's been achieved. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I think financial literacy is 1/3 of what I would see as a tripod for creating or improving trust of individuals in the financial services and products. The other two legs of the tripod are first consumer protection. There has to be protection of consumers in terms of getting the financial service providers to provide adequate information, to not have kind of forceful collection practices, to have limits on interest rates, that kind of thing. And the third leg of the tripod is the financial supervision and registration, so that the consumers have some confidence that the financial supervisors are looking at these financial service providing companies, making sure that they have sustainable business models and that they aren't pursuing practices that are harmful to the customers.
Yeah. I'll give an example. So a decade back, when we saw the flood of mobile money in Asia, and it started in Africa first. So still, I mean, till date, I mean, what we have seen is that assisted usage is far more than the customer's own usage. And explain it a bit. So assisted usage is basically when a customer goes to a mobile money agent, and she asks the agent to conduct the transactions on their behalf. And we have been tackling with the service providers that how do we deal with this, right? So one of the biggest findings is that the customers not every time trust the service provider directly, right? They trust the local person who is there in the locality. The trust comes from the social proofing. So trust comes from that somebody is there who's a bit more knowledgeable than me and who can do the transactions on my behalf, so that my money doesn't go in a wrong account. I don't end up with a fraudulent transaction. So these are simple things which the service providers have to keep in mind, that while building trust for the end customer, they have to ensure that the messaging regarding the product, the features, the services, on how to operate it, what would happen if things go wrong, has to be very concise and very clear, right? And preferably in a vernacular language which the customer would be able to relate with. And coming back to the larger question of does trust play a role? Yes, it does. Because when we talk about the financial health of any customer, so I mean, we can create access, we can look at usage, but the usage will only start happening when we enable trials. And the trials would come when the customer would start trusting the channel, the person who's offering the service, and the service provider at the end of the day. So the trust factor is, it plays a huge factor in terms of building this customer's financial health journey.
Any more comments on this one? Otherwise, we have a trending question here that goes back to Peter's comment. What is the reason why there is an inverse relationship between crypto assets and financial literacy? You're up to the task, Peter, on this one.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't ask people in the survey why that relationship came out. But I think, to be honest, if one looks at the literature on crypto assets, there are various websites with lots of posts by people. I have to say that the level of argument is not very high. I think that there seems to be a basic contradiction in the crypto asset literature, which is that crypto assets are an attractive asset for speculative investment, but at the same time, they're a stable source of value. And that to me is just a basic contradiction. But people don't seem to grasp that. So I suspect that the average level of financial literacy of those people who are particularly enthusiastic about crypto assets probably is not that high, and that if people had a more kind of financially literate perception of the attractiveness of those assets, they might come to a different conclusion.
Any comments from the rest of the panel here on this
Yeah, I think when we looked at the financial literacy outcomes, basically, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's something that's quite difficult to track. So at this point, with one of our partners, Teach for the Philippines, what we're doing is we are doing like focus groups with teachers that have already gone through our program. And then because these teachers are currently in the network itself already, so post 1 year and 2 year, we'll be able to kind of get them to answer certain questions and see whether there's any behavioral changes. But I think again, back to them, their own answering techniques, like it could vary, right? Because it's down to the individual answering the question whether they see themselves change in terms of like being more financial literate. So I think this probably is a little bit tough to measure, I would say. If anyone in the audience has like a program that you think you would like to partner with us on in terms of measuring impact, please let me know. But yeah, I think the other area that we could really involve was because our target audience is students, right? So I think the other area that we could measure would be on the parents, because when parents see their children's going through the changes itself, they'll be able to assess whether these children, having gone through financial literacy, like have they changed in terms of behavior. So I think the measurability in terms of like stakeholders has to be pretty wide and not just like on one single stakeholder itself.
I have a follow-up question. Is a lot of in Asia Pacific, there's a large portion of young people, and many of them are more connected and using devices. So how do you use these devices to reach out to the young people and anyone else?
So in terms of like financial literacy knowledge, like say for example in Malaysia, we actually created apps like that cater to this group of people, because they are not gonna go like answer questionnaires and like it being a very dry approach. So what we did was we actually created gameplay. So that's part of like them entering the game itself and answering questions relating to their day-to-day behavior. And from there, you can sense whether they're making the right financial literacy decision itself. So we use like creative concepts like that to entice these people to like, try out the game app itself, and at the same time we actually leverage a lot on social media. So we actually partnered with some social media outlets as well and influencers for them to promote the financial literacy, because with these young people there has to be sort of like a different way that you engage them rather than the traditional ways previously done.
Anyone else want to comment on that? I think otherwise we'll jump down to the question here. There's a little bit of a glare on the screen here. I mean, it really relates back to the opening session. There was also a lot of discussion on cybersecurity and data protection and consumer rights. And it says, no one has mentioned cyber safety as part of financial literacy. Any thoughts on that from our panel members here? Go ahead.
I would like to kind of bring to perspective, like we talk about consumer protection, we also have an element of, kind of helping clients understand and make them more capable of understanding how their information needs to be kept private, and and capable clients need to do that. But just kind of trying to bring a little bit of humor and some example here. I think the concerns are also kind of stemming up from the fact that that most of the times now with the digital credit and the application apps being used and the data being kind of used by different players in the market, what's happening is that if the providers are coming up and saying, if you want this product, what you need to do is like download the app, and the privacy clause is automatically part of it. So you cannot download an app unless and until you automatically accept the privacy clause, and that's kind of raising a lot of issues and concerns regarding privacy of client data. But the way we address that is more in terms of making clients capable of understanding their rights in terms of having the having the power to ensure that they are able to ask questions and hold their information safe, like for example, even using their PINs. So, but I think for cryptocurrency and others, I would refer back to Peter.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because traditional financial literacy and financial education has not really focused on issues of cyber safety. It's been the more traditional, just knowledge of bank accounts, interest rates, that sort of thing. So that's why we're sort of pushing this idea of digital financial literacy, where that is brought in as an explicit consideration that people have to know how to protect themselves from these various kinds of risks involved in using fintech products and services. So but unfortunately, there aren't any standards in this area yet. So I think this is a major area where further work needs to be done.
As I mentioned just now, we did like a digital technology course for elderly population in Singapore, and cybersecurity was actually part of the core content as part of that training session, because a lot of them, they may not be very familiar, and with all these people and hackers getting more advanced as well, they start incentivizing people, clicking on certain links and telling them that there's free airline tickets, free mobile devices to be won, and we had to educate them and say, there's no free lunch in this world, right? So it's not everything is free, then you just click on it. So I think a lot of it has to be built into the part of digital financial literacy as well.
Just one comment. What I want to kind of highlight is that it is the provider's responsibility to ensure that that cybersecurity is in place. I do not know how much is it possible for the client to ensure that his information is cyber secure. The only thing that we've seen in the field is that providers will nudge, ensure that the app is being tested every now and then to see that it's secured, and you would throw reminders to the client saying that why don't you refresh your apps or update them. So that's the way that you can prevent the security threats at this point. But it may be not so possible to kind of talk about cybersecurity to illiterate clients as such.
I think one way we've seen in some places a lot of people give out the PIN codes to friends or relatives to access their bank accounts and such. So that's one important aspect to take into consideration as well. And I'll just jump a little bit down. We've touched on this one a little bit. It's the second to the last question. And just to kind of build a little bit on that. It talks about what are the barriers to financial inclusion's trust. When people don't trust the banking system safety, how do we fix this misconception? So we've touched on it a little bit, but we can just relish on that a little bit more. Saturday is running along here. Technology.
I think we work a lot with financial institutions to promote trust in terms of the financial system, and we've constantly also focused and emphasized the importance of risk and security layers in place, for financial products that we are putting out into the market. And we work a lot with the banks as well as association of banks within countries to promote education as well. So I think those are things that would help gain the trust and confidence of consumers, because it is true, because even if we open up a lot of access for people to make payments, etc., but if they don't trust the financial system, there won't be usage. So I'll give a simple example. For example, when we first launched contactless payments with our partners, in Asia Pacific, and specifically in Singapore, because it is one of the most advanced countries to adopt contactless payments at this point, we had to really go down to educate cashiers on ground, train them on what this contactless payments is all about. In addition to that, we also had to train consumers, because a lot of them had the mindset that if I just use my card and then I tap it? Will I be able to, for example, like if I walk past the terminal and my wallet is really close to the terminal, can my card also be charged for that payment itself? So there were a lot of these questions that consumers had raised. And I think those were things that we really had to address. So we created a lot of video content. We did a lot of education with banks. We did a lot of education with the merchants. And today itself, like, it's become a norm behavior in Singapore where, people no longer bring their wallets out because they use their mobile devices to tap and pay and just go. And it brings a lot of convenience. So we always sort of emphasize that, be it like seamless and convenience, also comes with like security, and security should not be displaced just because of that seamlessness and convenience that people are looking for.
So, rightly said. So, there are a couple of comments I have on this. So there are two sets of customer segments who we normally work with. One who have the ability to comprehend when a bank or a service provider conveys to them that my system is trustworthy. You can trust for carrying out your transactions. The other set of customers, which are much more in number, usually those people who may not be able to get the message from the service provider. They would go rather by an opinion leader. They would rather go by somebody in their own community through a word of mouth. So what we have been doing is we're trying to promote these client stories. So when we work with a service provider and we go to a catchment area, we try to capture the positive outcomes of certain success stories, and we try to narrate it through multiple mediums. It could be videos, it could be sort of skits, it could be a print ad in the or a billboard. So there are certain these are certain areas wherein we try to convey the message that, okay, these systems and these transactions would go through properly. The second part is that most of us, and I'm including us as well in this conversation, that it would be better to know if anything goes wrong upfront and what would be the recourse for that. And that is one area wherein the service providers have been missing hugely. So when they market their product or when they sell their product, or even in the part of the financial education program, I mean, they will talk about the what, why, and how part of it. But they will never, you'll seldom see them speaking about what would happen if things go wrong. How can I get my money back? Right. So that is one area, I mean, we have been trying to negotiate with service providers. As Hema said, it's the responsibility of service providers. Unfortunately, they see it as a part of a mandate. Regulators have been trying to work around this. I am currently working in Vietnam, and we've been working with the State Bank of Vietnam around this issue, but it's a long journey, I mean, honestly.
Yeah, again, I think it comes up back to these other dimensions of consumer protection and financial supervision and regulation. And one obvious example would be deposit insurance. If people are worried that the bank is going to go bust, if you have a deposit insurance system in place, then at least up to a certain size of deposit, then people will have much more confidence.
Thank you, Peter, for advocating consumer protection. Yes, trust, I mean, again, trust kicks into the elements of consumer protection principles that we have. And in terms of even we've seen that issues of transparency, for example, that's where the convergence of consumer protection and I would say financial capability takes place, because when service providers are communicating the pricing or the terms and conditions to the clients, that's where how do you kind of communicate, and the communication techniques that's being used. If the app is made, if it's simple, is it in fine print? How much time is given for a screen for a client to look at? So all of that are elements of financial capability, but then that, and if they are kind of designed appropriately, that can lead to improving trust with the client. So all of that seems to be then now converging with the consumer protection element that can foster trust, as well as financial capability approaches that can foster trust between the client and the provider.